Have you ever wondered why first impressions seem to carry so much weight, almost as if they set a silent template for everything that follows in a relationship or a brief encounter? Welcome to this space where we explore the quiet, often unseen ways our minds interpret the world around us and the people who inhabit it. This isn't about pointing fingers or criticizing anyone for how they look or how they act, but rather a gentle and reflective look at a common human experience known as the halo effect. It is an idea that many people notice once it is pointed out. This tendency for one visible positive trait, like a person's appearance or their charisma, to color our entire perception of their personality, their intelligence, and even their moral character. It can sometimes seem like we have already decided who someone is before they have even had a chance to speak their first word. This is where perception quietly shifts. When we meet someone who presents themselves in a way we find pleasing or symmetrical, our brains often perform a bit of mental shorthand. Because we see something we instinctively like, we might unconsciously assume they also possess a wealth of other qualities like honesty, competence, or kindness. It is a shortcut our minds take to simplify an incredibly complex world, helping us make sense of the thousands of people we might encounter throughout our lives. Here is what people often don't notice. This bias isn't usually something we do on purpose, or with any sort of unkind intent. It is a subtle background process, a way of organizing information that research often suggests is deeply rooted in how we evolved to navigate social groups. In a social setting, a casual gathering, or even a professional job interview, a person's presence might lead us to overlook a small mistake or interpret a vague comment in the most favorable light possible. It isn't that anyone is necessarily trying to be deceptive, but rather that our own internal lens filters the data we receive through that initial positive impression. This is the part that is easy to overlook. We might find ourselves giving the benefit of the doubt to someone simply because they fit a certain aesthetic standard we have been taught to value by the world around us. This isn't just about beauty in a traditional or narrow sense, but about a general aura of correctness or polish that we project onto others. When things go wrong or when someone behaves in a way that is perhaps less than ideal, that initial halo can act as a silent shield, making their actions seem like a one-time fluke, rather than a reflection of who they truly are. We tend to want our initial impressions to be right, because our brains prefer consistency over contradiction. So we might unintentionally ignore evidence that doesn't fit the story we have already written for them. This is where perception quietly shifts again, as we prioritize that internal harmony over the messy reality of human behavior. Think about the stories we see in media, the heroes in our favorite films, or the way public figures are presented to us. So often, the people we are meant to trust are shown with a certain visual clarity that reinforces their perceived goodness. This creates a feedback loop where we expect certain behaviors from certain people, and when they don't meet those expectations, we find ourselves finding ways to rationalize it or explain it away as a misunderstanding. It is a fascinating look at the human psyche, not as a flaw but as a testament to how much we rely on visual cues to navigate our social landscapes. Here is what people often don't notice. We often do this to ourselves as well, feeling a quiet pressure to maintain a certain image, because we intuitively understand that the world might be a little bit kinder to us if we do. This reflection isn't meant to be a critique of society or a lecture on how we should feel, but an invitation to notice the invisible threads that pull at our judgments every single day. When we become aware of the halo effect, we don't necessarily stop experiencing it. Our brains are very good at what they do, after all. But we can pause and ask ourselves if we are seeing the whole person, or just the light they happen to be standing in at that moment. This is the part that is easy to overlook. By recognizing these biases, we open up a space for much more genuine connections that can go beyond the surface and into the actual depth of another human being. It is about moving toward a more nuanced and thoughtful understanding of the people around us. acknowledging that everyone is a complex, sometimes contradictory mix of traits that can't ever be fully summed up by a single impression. We often see this play out in the smallest moments, like how a teacher might unintentionally expect more from a well-dressed student, or how a stranger in a grocery store might be more likely to help someone who looks like they belong to a certain social circle. These moments aren't about right or wrong. They are about the shortcuts our brains use to manage the overwhelming amount of information the world throws at us. This is where perception quietly shifts, moving from a simple observation to a structured belief system. Without us even realizing it happened, we tend to lean into what is comfortable and familiar, and often what is aesthetically pleasing feels safe. It is a natural inclination to want the world to be beautiful, and for the people in it to match that beauty on the inside. When we encounter a situation where that isn't the case, where someone we admire based on their present behaves in a way that is hurtful or indifferent, it creates a sense of cognitive dissonance. To resolve that discomfort, we might downplay the behavior, rather than questioning the initial impression. Here is what people often don't notice. This cycle can allow people to navigate life with fewer obstacles, not because they are intentionally manipulating others, but because the collective perception of the group is acting as a tailwind. It is an interesting thing to consider how much of our social standing is built on these invisible foundations of bias. As we move through our day, perhaps we can try to look a little closer at the moments where we feel an instant spark of trust or an immediate wave of skepticism. Is it based on what the person is doing, or is it based on the halo we have placed over them? This is the part that is easy to overlook. Taking that extra second to look past the first impression doesn't just help us understand others better, it helps us understand ourselves and the way we choose to interact with the world. It is a journey toward a more balanced perspective, where we can appreciate beauty and charisma without letting them blind us to the full spectrum of human experience. If we can learn to see the person behind the presentation, we might find that the world is much more interesting and varied than our shortcuts would lead us to believe. It is about finding a sense of balance in a world that often demands we make up our minds in an instant. If this reflection on how we see one another resonated with you, feel free to like, comment, and subscribe to join us for more thoughtful explorations. Thanks for being here and for taking the time to reflect with me.